Here's what nobody tells you about manifestation. The order you've been taught is completely backwards. You were told, get the relationship, then feel loved. Get the money, then feel secure. Get the job, then feel successful. And that's exactly why it keeps not working. In this video, I'm going to walk you through why that order is backwards and what the actual sequence looks like once you flip it. We're going to talk about why reality behaves like a mirror and not a vending machine, why working harder almost never fixes the actual problem, and what a magnetic frequency really consists of versus what quietly cancels it out. Then I'm going to give you 4 specific, practical things you can start doing today to build that frequency, including one that has nothing to do with thinking positive at all. So if you've ever achieved a goal and felt strangely the same, stick around, because I'm about to explain exactly why that happens. Let's start with the backwards order, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Almost everyone operates on this sequence. Get the thing, then feel the emotion. Get the relationship, then feel loved. Get the money, then feel secure. Get the job, then feel successful. It seems logical. It seems like the only order that makes sense. But here's the problem. External things cannot permanently create an emotion. They can spike one for a while, but if your underlying identity and emotional baseline haven't changed, you drift right back to wherever you started. This is why people get the promotion and still feel anxious, why people get into the relationship and still feel insecure, why people hit the income goal and still feel like it's not enough. The thing arrived, the feeling didn't stick. Because the feeling was never actually downstream of the thing, it just looked that way. The real order runs the opposite direction. Change your emotional state and your identity first. Let the external reality catch up later. I know that sounds backwards to how we've been taught to operate our entire lives, so let's slow down on why this is actually true and not just a nice sentence. Think about reality as something closer to a mirror than a vending machine. A vending machine gives you something different from what you put in. You put in money, you get out a snack. A mirror gives you back exactly what you're already showing it. If you're constantly focused on lack, on fear, on what's missing, on the insecurity of not having the thing yet, you're not neutral. You're feeding the mirror a very specific image, and it keeps reflecting that image back as more of the same conditions. But if you can embody abundance, peace, confidence, and love internally, even before the external proof shows up, the mirror eventually has to start reflecting that instead. This is the part most people skip, and it's also the part I'm going to circle back to later in this video, because there's a layer underneath emotional state that makes this whole mechanism actually click into place. So keep that in mind because it changes everything I'm about to explain next. Now here's where it gets interesting, and this comes from a much older framework than most people realize. Hermetic philosophy, the same body of thought behind the phrase, as above, so below. In this framework, there are 3 levels to existence. At the top is source, sometimes called universal consciousness or simply the all. Below that is the mental plane, thought, imagination, belief. And at the very bottom, the last and lowest expression of the whole stack, is physical reality. The physical world isn't the starting point, it's the output. Consciousness creates reality, not the other way around, which means trying to change your life by only rearranging the physical plane, switching jobs, switching cities, switching partners, without ever touching the mental and emotional level above it, is like trying to edit a printed photo instead of editing the file it was printed from. You can erase a corner, but the original file is still going to print out the same image next time. This is exactly why hard work alone so often doesn't deliver what people expect. We're told that if results aren't showing up, you simply need to work harder, take more action, force the outcome through sheer effort. But action doesn't originate out of nowhere. It originates from your state of consciousness. If your underlying state hasn't shifted, you're just taking the same action, from the same identity, with more intensity. You get a louder version of the same result, not a different one. Getting a genuinely different result requires a different state of being, not simply more hours at the same frequency. There's a useful real-world example of this with people who've grown businesses or built an audience from scratch. The period of working harder and harder for marginal gains, followed by a period where almost nothing about the hours changed, but the identity behind the work did. And that's when the actual leap happened. The effort didn't change. The person doing the effort did. So let's actually define what we mean by magnetic, because I promised I'd come back to it. A magnetic internal state is built from peace, calm, trust, abundance, acceptance, and joy. A non-magnetic state is built from fear, lack, neediness, stress, obsession, and survival mode. And here's the layer underneath emotional state I mentioned earlier, the thing that decides which of those two columns you default to without even trying. It's the assumption you're currently living from. Whatever you've quietly assumed to be true about yourself, your worth, and what you're allowed to have becomes the lens you experience everything through, before you even get a say in it. Change the assumption, and the emotional state that flows out of it changes automatically, without you having to force it. So here are 4 practical things that actually build this state, not just talk about it. The first is living in the end. Instead of mentally rehearsing the lack of the thing, the empty inbox, the unanswered text, the job you don't have yet, you deliberately spend time, even just a few minutes, imagining the scene as it would be if the wish were already fulfilled. Not as a daydream you know is fake, as something closer to a memory. The mind doesn't file vivid imagination and lived experience into 2 completely separate drawers, which is exactly why a scene you keep returning to in your imagination can shift your baseline mood the same way a real memory does. The second is revision. At the end of the day, instead of replaying what actually happened the way it happened, you mentally rewrite any moment that didn't go the way you wanted, and you replay the corrected version until it feels settled instead of charged. You're not pretending the original event didn't happen. You're refusing to let one unwanted moment keep writing your assumption about who you are and what tends to happen to you. The third is choosing your self-concept on purpose. Most people let their self-concept get built by accident, out of old comments, old failures, and old labels that got attached to them years ago and never got questioned since. The alternative is deciding, deliberately, what you're going to assume about yourself going forward, and catching yourself the moment you slip back into the old description, the same way you'd catch yourself slouching and correct your posture without making a whole event out of it. The fourth is responding instead of reacting. When something difficult happens, the instinct is to emotionally collapse or let the circumstance define your whole state. The alternative is choosing your response on purpose, even in a hard moment. And one belief that makes this dramatically easier is simply deciding that the circumstance is evidence of an old assumption finishing itself off, not proof of what's coming next. That distinction alone keeps your emotional state stable, regardless of what the external situation looks like right now. So here's the actual climax of everything we've covered. Stop chasing external results to feel better, because that's the backwards order we started with. Become the person who already feels the emotions you're trying to chase down through circumstances. Live in the scene of the wish fulfilled before the evidence arrives. Revise the moments that tried to convince you otherwise. Choose your self-concept on purpose instead of by accident. And respond instead of collapsing when life gets hard. Do that consistently, and you stop needing reality to prove anything to you first, because reality, like a mirror, eventually has no choice but to show you back exactly what you've already become. If this reframed how you've been thinking about manifestation, drop a like so I know it landed. If this video helped you, make sure to like it, and don't forget to subscribe. In the upcoming videos, we'll go deeper into how to actually change your identity across different areas of your life.